My name is Julia Albrecht. I will graduate in about 6 days with a Bachelor's of Science degree in elementary education. I am currently student teaching at Rousseau Elementary in kindergarten. My chosen theme is teaching subject matter, specifically reading. Within that, I've added in movement into my reading lessons. First, I will say my competency and my guiding questions. Then I will move into my 3 pieces of evidence, and I will wrap up by saying how I synthesize and how I reflect. First, my competency is I am competent at planning reading lessons that involve movement to foster a brain-friendly learning environment to help build understanding. I have 2 guiding questions that I use and I will continue to come back to. The first one is, how do students learn within a particular subject matter? And number 2 is, how can student background knowledge be assessed in the teaching of subject matter? My first piece of evidence is from when I was in my literacy block at Kuser Elementary in 3rd grade. I was excited to start teaching reading, so I planned a whole group reading lesson about how can we reuse what we already have. I started out with our objectives, my expectations, had a good hook, explained our vocabulary words and discussed those a bit, and then went into reading our anthology. My students were looking around, talking to their neighbor. Overall, I didn't think they took much away. There was not much learning going on. So as I reflected, I thought, wow, I only briefly went over those vocabulary words, which is a huge part of this reading unit. I could have done more. I knew from my class TAC 380 centered around movement and applying activities into lessons that students are more engaged and they do better. So as I reflected, I thought I could have added some type of movement to go back to my competency statement to foster a brain-friendly learning environment and really build some understanding. So that's where I started. I'm moving forward into my second artifact. Now I am tutoring at the Reading Center to a boy named Derek, and he's having quite a hard time with these high-frequency words when he is reading. He often asks me to stop and what is this word? Words like because, with, teacher, school, friends, words that he should probably know as a 4th grader. So I thought, he loves to move around. Every time he's coming into me, he's running or he's tapping his leg. And I know his background knowledge with reading is he struggles a lot. So I thought, let's take these high frequency words and start with them every day when we are tutoring. I took those 5 to 7 words, put them on note cards, and I said we will spell them, we will write these words, and then we're also gonna hop up and we're gonna do some movement. We're gonna march to these words, we're gonna do the robot, we are going to tap our fingers. I had him pick 2. Well, after a while of doing this, I saw great strides in his reading. He was understanding these words, so the movement allowed him to slow down, process the words, remember them, and overall have a better confidence in himself. I looked back at his fluency and his accuracy. When we started this semester, he was at about 90% accuracy and had 40 words correct per minute. After about 4 or 5 weeks of doing this, he had a 96% accuracy and 65 words correct per minute. So he was improving in his reading, really growing and understanding these words. I also put in my reflection that he is spelling these words more effectively. It's showing in his reading and he's growing as a reader. He also had a huge confidence and enjoyed coming to me every day, which I love to see. Then I will look at where I am now, my 3rd piece of evidence. I am student teaching at Rousseau with kindergartners, and you know that little ones like to move around, they're giddy, they're giggly, and our whole group reading is at the end of the day, so they're restless. So I looked at what they had done before. During reading, they're dragging and they're almost closing their eyes, so I thought now, I've looked at my students, I've assessed their background knowledge, and I also know that they like to move around. So I thought I would put some movement into our whole group reading lesson. That involves taking this unit's vocabulary words and adding an action to them. So I started the lesson off with our objectives, our expectations, and then I explained the vocabulary words with the slideshow, and then I hopped up, I did it, I showed them these words, then we did it together, and then I had them do it on their own. So I said, close your eyes, and I would show a word on the screen, and they could do the movement. Throughout the story, they were eagerly holding up V's to show me vocabulary words, and they had a parent understanding of the story. So looking at my competency statement, I started that brain-friendly mindset, and then they were building on their understanding of the story because they knew these words. As you can see in my artifact, I said, kids, close your eyes, let's see if you can do this on your own, and then I'd randomly show a word and they could keep up with me. I also wanted to see if they could build on this understanding. They know it while we're reading, but can they do it in a different context? So every week we have a vocabulary notebook and they can pick a word. Normally we do this as a whole group, but I decided to have them work with a partner and be more independent. So Asher and his partner chose the word distance, and they wrote together, the distance from school to the zoo is short. So that was a huge gain because normally we do this whole group under the big screen. Also in reading, we review the previous week's words. So the next week I had my cooperating teacher see if they could still do these movements because they will be in this week's reading. Here is a video of them doing the action the next week for distance. Normally we would be standing, but since we're just reviewing, they're sitting. And then we also have them doing the action for space, so they could do it. So as I go through my artifacts, I started out with nothing for the kids to do. They were not engaged, they did not have an understanding of the reading. Next, I used what I knew about my student's background and how he learns in a particular subject, reading, and I added some movement and saw a huge growth in his overall fluency in reading, and he had a confidence in himself. Next, I took that to a whole group in my student teaching and applied it to my kindergartners in our reading lesson. And they were giddy, they were excited, and they understood what the story was about and then could apply it to a different context. So as I'm looking at my artifacts, I have two big ideas, so I'm synthesizing. My first one is when movement is integrated into reading, the children are engaged and more aware of the material. My second one is it's important to know your students and how they learn best in a subject matter. That was very important to me. As I reflect, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned that I like teaching reading and building those skills that they can use in the future. I like to be proactive for my students and try new things. And I also learned that I'm patient because this will not always work and it takes a lot of practice. This tells me that teaching reading is hard, it's challenging, there's so much to incorporate, but as a teacher you have to break things down and be concrete with children, make it more applicable to them, and movement does that. There is some limitations of my competency. I understand that this might not always work. It might not always be purposeful in every reading lesson. I also know that it might not be applicable to every room, and this could cause some behavior, so I will address those behaviors. In the future, I want to do more research on this. I also want to collaborate with my teachers, my team, and see what works for them, what they have tried, and also try to apply it to other subject matters. I want to get my master's and continue my education and take advantage of all professional learning. I also want to get a job. I got one, so check that off. As I move back, I am competent at planning reading lessons that involve movement in order to foster a brain-friendly learning environment to help build understanding.